Good day. Let's continue with your cellular structures. Okay, and so for your major parts of your cell, you have your cell membrane, your nucleus, and your cytoplasm. Okay, and so with this, let's take a look at your cytoplasm. Accordingly, it is a gel-like substance that surrounds the nucleus and packed with various organelles and molecules, each of which serves a specific function. Okay, and this one for your cytoplasm, this one is the site of most cellular activities. And you have your what you call this, your cytosol and your cytoplasmic organelles present in your cytoplasm. When you say cytoplasm, that is otherwise known as your intracellular fluid. Okay, and so that is otherwise known as your intracellular fluid. And please note that your cytosol, it is 55% of your total cell volume, and approximately 90% of your cytosol is water. And with this, it contains substances like ions, so proteins, and cytoplasmic inclusions like your vacuoles, hemosiderin granules, and the rest of your cytoplasmic inclusions. And again, this one is the site of many chemical reactions required for a cell's existence. Again, this one is approximately 90% water. And for your cytosol, again, this one is otherwise known as your intracellular fluid. And it houses your cytosol, that is your fluid where your cytoplasmic organelles floats. Okay, and so here you have here an illustration of your cell. Okay, and so an illustration of your cell depicting your different cellular structures and your cytoplasmic organelles. You have your mitochondria, you have your ribosomes, your Golgi bodies, you have your endoplasmic reticulum, your rough, your smooth, your nucleus, and then the rest of your cellular structures. Okay? In your cytoplasm, you have your cytoskeleton. Okay, for your cytoskeleton, this is actually a network of three types of protein filaments that extends throughout the cytosol. Okay, and so you have your three types of protein filaments present here. You have your microfilaments, your intermediate filaments, and your microtubules. Okay, and so this one, the largest of your cytoskeleton, you have your microfilaments, followed by intermediate filaments, and the smallest accordingly is your microtubules. Okay, let's take a look at your microfilaments. Okay, and so microfilaments, they are composed of actin and myosin. These are proteins. Okay, they are composed of actin and myosin, and they are most prevalent at the edge of a cell. They are most prevalent at the edge of a cell accordingly. And with that, they generate movement and provide mechanical support. Okay, and so they generate movement and provide mechanical support. With this, they are involved in muscle contraction, cell division, and cell locomotion accordingly. And yes, this one is responsible for the basic strength and shape of your cell. And yes, aside from this, since your microfilaments, they are most prevalent at the edge of a cell, with this one, they provide support for your microvilli. They provide support for your microvilli, that is for your microfilaments. Okay, and then moving on to your intermediate filaments, they are found in parts of cell that are subject to mechanical stress. If your microfilaments are found in your edge of the cell, these intermediate filaments, they are found in parts of your cells that are subject to your mechanical stress. And yes, this one will help stabilize the position of organelles also and help attach cells to one another. And yes, moving on to your microtubules. Microtubules, they are accordingly mainly made of the protein tubulin. Okay, and so if your microfilaments, they are made of actin and myosin. For your microtubules, they are mainly made of the protein tubulin. Okay, and so with this, it helps determine your cell shape. And this one is also important in the movement of organelles. Okay, and so this one is also important in the movement of organelles. Okay, and so to sum up, your cytoskeleton, this one functions or serves as a scaffold that helps determine a cell's shape and organize the cellular contents. And also, it helps in the movement of organelles within the cell, also of your chromosomes during your cell division, and of the whole cell, such as during uh, phagocytosis accordingly. Okay, and so for this one, next you have your cilia and your flagella. Your cilia here, they are short hair-like projections that extend from the cell surface. Okay, and yes, your microfilament, this is actually a dominant component of your cilia and flagella. Okay, and so your cilia, this one functions for the movement of fluid along the cell surface. Okay, and then your flagella usually will move an entire cell. Okay, and so with this, you have the movement accordingly. You have here your wiggling in a wave-like pattern. Okay, an example of your cell with a flagella, you have your sperm cell. Okay, and so soon as we move, we have we will take a look at your ciliated cells present in different parts of the body. And please don't forget that the function of the cilia present is for the movement of fluid or movement of secretions in the cell surface. Okay, this one is an illustration of a cilia. It is a short hair-like projection. And for your, what do you call this, for your flagella. Okay, and so this one is longer and larger comparing it with this. This one is zoomed. Okay, and so for the two. And again, your sperm cell, that is the only cell in the human body with a flagella. Okay, and yes, let's take a look at your cytoplasmic organelles. Your cytoplasmic organelles, they are specialized structures within the cell that have characteristic shapes that serve as metabolic machinery of the cell. Okay, and so earlier I showed you an illustration of a cell, and yes, you have actually different shapes of organelles. For your mitochondria, it is the shape of your mitochondria is different from the shape of your peroxisome, also different from the shape of your lysosome. Okay, and so for this one. And each type of organelle is specialized to carry out a specific function for for the cell as a whole accordingly. And yes, your organelles, they have their own set of enzymes that carry out specific reactions. And yes, with this, okay, and so your organelles, your cytoplasmic organelles, again, they have their own set, they carry specific function, and for uh for what you call this, to avoid the reaction interferences, you have actually membrane boundaries that will allow organelles to maintain an internal environment quite different from that of the surrounding. Okay, again, to avoid reaction interferences, you have your membrane boundaries that allow organelles to maintain an internal environment that are somewhat quite different from that of the surrounding cytosol. Okay, and so with this, of course, you have your membrane that will allow compartmentalization. And please note that compartmentalization is crucial to their ability, of course, to perform their specialized functions for the cell. And yes, overall, again, and so it will, what they call this, the compartmentalization or the the membrane present in these organelles function to avoid reaction interferences also. Okay. And yes, of course, you have your centrosome. Your centrosome, this one is located near the nucleus. Please note that it is situated near the nucleus. Okay, and so with this, it consists of two components. You have a pair of centrioles and the pericentriolar matrix. Okay, and so you have your centrioles that are actually surrounded by your pericentriolar matrix. Your centrioles, they are cylindrical structures composed of 9 clusters of 3 microtubules arranged in a circular pattern. And please note that you have your pericentricular matrix contains ring-shaped complexes of tubulin. Your tubulin here will be your organizing centers for growth of the mitotic spindle, which plays a critical role in cell division. And yes, for microtubule formation in non-dividing cells. And yes, the function of your centrosome, your pericentricular matrix of your centrosome contains tubulin again that will build microtubules in non-dividing cells and will form mitotic spindle during cell division. Okay, that is for the centrosome. Your ribosome, this one is another cytoplasmic organelle. Okay, and so your ribosome, this one is regarded as the sites for protein. Your ribosomes regarded as the sites for protein synthesis. And yes, it consists of two subunits made separately in the nucleus. Okay, and so your nucleus that is present inside your nucleus will produce ribosomes. They are the ones responsible in producing your ribosomes. Of course, with this, they are named as ribosomes because they have a high content of one type of ribonucleic acid. Okay, and so for this one. And yes, you have your free ribosomes also and your attached ribosomes. For your attached ribosomes, they are attached in your rough endoplasmic reticulum. You also have ribosomes that are present in your mitochondria. Okay, and so they are also found in the mitochondria. For your attached ribosomes, those ribosomes attached in your rough endoplasmic reticulum, they synthesize proteins for specific organelles. Okay, and so they synthesize proteins for specific organelles. Other than that, they also synthesize proteins for insertion in the plasma membrane, and they also synthesize proteins for export from the cell for secretion. Okay, and so again, you have they synthesize proteins for specific organelles. They synthesize proteins for insertion into the plasma membrane, and they also synthesize proteins for secretion. While your free ribosomes, they will synthesize proteins for the cytosol. Okay, and so to be used in the cytosol. Again, your free ribosomes, they will synthesize proteins to be used in the cytosol. Okay, and so they are not membrane, they are not uh they will not be incorporated in the cell membrane or be incorporated in the organelles, but then only they will be used in the cytosol. Okay, and so for this one, moving on, you have your endoplasmic reticulum. Okay, and so your endoplasmic reticulum, this is a network of membrane that forms in the I mean network of membranes in the form of flattened sacs or tubules. Okay, so that is accordingly the shape or the structure of your endoplasmic reticulum. Okay, and so flattened sacs or tubules. And yes, your endoplasmic reticulum extends from the nuclear envelope. Okay, accordingly, you have two types of your endoplasmic reticulum. You have the rough and your smooth one. Okay, and so your rough endoplasmic reticulum, this one is continuous with the nuclear membrane. This one is continuous with the nuclear membrane. That is why, suppose in illustrations, it should be surrounding the cell nucleus. And yes, it is rough because it is studded with ribosomes. It has a lot of ribosomes attached to it. Okay, and your rough endoplasmic reticulum, it produces secretory proteins, membrane proteins, and organellar proteins. Again, okay, and so with this, your attached ribosomes, as what we said earlier, they will synthesize proteins for secretion. They will synthesize proteins for that will be incorporated in the cell membrane, and they will also synthesize proteins that will be used by your cytoplasmic organelles. Okay, and so with this, for your rough, your the synthesized proteins in your rough endoplasmic reticulum, or probably the synthesized proteins synthesized by the ribosomes attached in your rough endoplasmic reticulum, will actually enter the spaces within your endoplasmic reticulum for processing and sorting. Okay, and so they will enter for the rough endoplasmic reticulum for processing and sorting. And yes, after being processed, they will be maybe again incorporated into the membranes of your organelles or in the cell membrane, or be secreted via exocytosis. Okay, that is for your rough endoplasmic reticulum. And in the absence of the ribosomes in your rough ER, then they will only function for processing and sorting. Okay, so let's take a look at your smooth endoplasmic reticulum. In contrast to your rough endoplasmic reticulum that contains ribosomes, your smooth ER does not contain ribosomes. Instead, it contains enzymes. It contains enzymes. And since it does not contain and it does not contain ribosomes, it is not capable of producing proteins or synthesizing proteins. And but then it is capable of synthesizing fatty acids, steroids like estrogen and testosterone. Okay, again, it does not contain ribosomes but contains enzymes. And yes, your smooth endoplasmic reticulum help release glucose into the bloodstream. In the liver, kidney and in the liver, sorry, it will inactivate lipid-soluble drugs or potentially harmful substances. With this, it will somewhat function for detoxification. And in the liver, kidney, and intestinal cells, it will remove the phosphate group of your glucose 6 phosphate. Again, it will in the liver, kidney, and intestinal cells, it removes your smooth endoplasmic reticulum, removes the phosphate group from your glucose 6 phosphate. And in the muscle, it stores and releases calcium ions that trigger contraction in muscle cells. That is for your smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Moving on to your Golgi complex. Your Golgi complex, they consist of 3 to 20 cisterns. Okay, they consist of 3 to 20 cisterns. You have here your small flattened membranous sacs with bulging edges that resemble a stack of pita bread accordingly. Okay, and so you have here an illustration of your Golgi complex. Okay, and so you have here your cis and the trans phases of your Golgi complex. For the cis phase, it serves as the entry of the proteins. Okay, and so it serves as the entry of the proteins. With this, of course, with this being the entry of proteins, it should be near or it should face your rough endoplasmic reticulum, and your trans, it will face the plasma membrane. With this, of course, for secretion. Okay, and so the function of your Golgi complex, it will modify, sort, package, and transport proteins. Okay, it will modify, sort, package, and transport proteins. And yes, this one will form how will this Golgi complex transport proteins? Of course, it will form secretory vesicles that discharge processed proteins. Please note that Golgi complexes are present or more extensively seen in cells that secrete proteins, those that synthesize proteins. And yes, again, they form your Golgi complex. They form membrane vesicles that ferry new molecules to the plasma membrane. And they also form transport vesicles that carry molecules to other organelles, such as your lysosome. Okay, and so your Golgi complexes. Okay, with this, probably all of your vesicles or the vesicles present in this cell, they come from your Golgi complex. Your lysosomes. They contain as many as 60 kind of powerful digestive and hydrolytic enzymes. Okay, for your lysosomes. And this one is what you call as the suicide bags. Your lysosomes, they are regarded as the suicide bags of the cell. And yes, okay, so they contain as many as 60 kinds of powerful digestive and hydrolytic enzymes. And with that being said, they can digest substances that enter a cell via endocytosis, and they transport the final products of digestion into the cytosol for this one. Okay, and so in this case, since you have here your lysosomes, they have a lot of hydrolytic enzymes. Your lysosomal interior accordingly has a pH of 5. Okay, a pH of 5, and this is acidic. This one accordingly is more acidic than the pH of the cytosol. Okay, and so how are you going to maintain that pH of 5 in the pH of 5 inside the lysosome? You have here, it will accordingly include active transport pumps that will import hydrogen ions inside the cytosol, inside the lysosome. Again, active transport pumps that will import hydrogen ions inside the lysosome to maintain a pH of 5. Okay, and yes, it will your lysosome, since again it has many as 60 kinds of powerful digestive enzymes, it can accomplish extracellular digestion, and with this also it will help recycle worn out cell structures. It will recycle worn out cell structures. No, okay, and so seen in autophagy and autolysis accordingly. In autophagy, this one is involved your autophagy is involved in cellular differentiation. Accordingly, control of growth, tissue remodeling, and adaptation to adverse environments, and also cell defense. And yes, your lysosomes is capable of doing autophagy. Okay, and so in your autophagy here, this one is the breakdown of of what you call this, of cytoplasmic organelle. Okay, and so when you have a worn out cytoplasmic organelle, then your lysosomes is accordingly activated to destroy and recycle your lysosoma, your cytoplasmic, that worn out cytoplasmic organelle. And for your autolysis, accordingly, this one occurs in some pathological conditions. Autolysis, this one is the digestion of your whole cell. Okay? And yes, your autolysis and autophagy is accomplished by your lysosome. Okay, going back to your peroxisomes. You have this one contains several oxidases that can oxidize organic substances. Okay, and so when you have for your lysosomes, they have hydrolytic enzymes. With this, it has oxidases. And in case of size, your lysosomes, they are larger than peroxisomes. And yes, your peroxisome, since it has oxidases, it will oxidize toxic substances like alcohol. It will oxidize toxic substances like alcohol and will remove hydrogen atoms from various toxic substances. Okay, and so during what we call this, during the process of oxidation, it will produce hydrogen peroxide as a byproduct. Of course, with this, and please, your hydrogen peroxide is somewhat toxic. Okay, so it is harmful to your cell. They are toxic or harmful to your cell. But then your peroxisomes, they also contain enzyme that can destroy or decompose hydrogen peroxide that is produced or that is a byproduct of the function of peroxisome. And you call that enzyme catalase. This enzyme catalase will decompose H2O2, rendering it safe. Okay, and so with that, you're also, for your peroxisomes, your amino acids and fatty acids are oxidized as part, of course, of your normal protein metabolism. And with that being said, you have with that being said, the function of your peroxisomes as will oxidize organic substances. This one is abundant in the liver, where detoxification of alcohol and other damaging substances occur. Okay, and also it has an enzyme that can destroy superoxide anion, or will destroy somewhat your free radicals. Proteasome. Your proteasome, they are a tiny barrel-shaped structures consisting of four stacked rings of proteins around a central core. No? Okay, and so they are the a function for continuous destruction of unneeded damaged or faulty proteins. And yes, it is proteasome because it contains a lot of proteases that will again destroy unneeded damaged or faulty proteins. Okay, and yes, this one is important in cellular differentiation accordingly. Your mitochondria. Your mitochondria. This one is regarded as your powerhouse of the cell. It is regarded as the powerhouse of the cell because it will generate ATP or energy in the form of ATP. Okay, and so that is actually the main role of your mitochondria to generate adenosine triphosphate through reactions of aerobic cellular respiration. And yes, aside from it generates ATP through the reactions of aerobic respiration, cellular respiration, it also plays an important role, early role in apoptosis. Your apoptosis here is cell death accordingly. Okay, and so how will your mitochondria do that? Accordingly, your, what do you call this, the your mitochondria will somewhat produce cytochrome C that will stimulate or initiate cell lysis. And your mitochondria, it has an external mitochondrial membrane and an internal mitochondrial membrane. And aside from that, you have your folds of the cristae. You have your cristae. Okay, and so you have here an illustration of your mitochondria. You have your outer mitochondria, external mitochondrial membrane, and your internal mitochondrial membrane, and you have your cristae accordingly. Okay, and you have here for your folds of the cristae, the folds of the cristae provide a surface area for the chemical reactions that are part of aerobic phase of your cellular respiration, again for the production of ATP. And yes, since in your cristae, it provides the surface area, this is where also you can find your enzymes. Enzymes that are needed to catalyze, enzymes needed for cellular respiration. And aside from your cristae, you have also your mitochondrial matrix. In your mitochondrial matrix, you can also find a lot of enzymes that are needed for cellular respiration. And yes, your mitochondria, they are seen in cells, numerous in cells that, in active cells that use adenosine triphosphate at a high rate. And examples of those cells, you have your cells that are found in your muscles. Okay, and so because again, and so they are active cells that use ATP. Okay, muscles, the cells found in the liver and also in the kidneys. All of these tissues, they contain cells that have a large number of mitochondria due to their activity. And yes, this one is usually located within a cell where oxygen enters the cell or where the ATP is used. No, okay. And so going back to the illustration that I showed you earlier, the mitochondria is located at the periphery of the cell. Okay. And again, you have here your external mitochondrial matrix together with your internal mitochondrial matrix giving you your mitochondrial membrane giving you your mitochondrial matrix that wherein you will find your enzymes. Okay, and then moving on to your cytoplasmic inclusions. You have your cytoplasmic inclusions. They are accordingly non-living substances that may or may not be present in the cell. Okay, and so depending upon the cell type. You have here your cytoplasmic inclusions include secretory inclusions like enzymes, acids, proteins, and mucosubstances. Nutritive inclusions like glycogen and lipids, and pigment granules like melanin, lipofuscin, hemosiderin, and vacuoles, or you have your food vacuoles and your water vacuoles accordingly.
Hanga classes.
And yes, finally, you have your nucleus. Your nucleus, this is a spherical or oval-shaped structure, and usually that is the most prominent feature of a cell. Okay, and so for a general rule, we have for a one cell, you have one nucleus. Okay, and so that is the general rule. 1:1 of a cell, it contains one nucleus. But then there are exceptions. Like your red blood cells, they do not have your normal red blood cells, they do not have nucleus together with your thrombocytes. And in contrast, you have your skeletal muscle cells that contain multiple nuclei. Okay, and so in your nucleus, it is also enclosed by a membrane. It is enclosed by a membrane that is known as your nuclear membrane or your nuclear envelope. With this, it separates the nucleus from the cytoplasm. Okay, and then you have also your pores, your nuclear pore that consists of circular arrangement of proteins surrounding a large central opening. And what is the function of your nuclear pore? Your nuclear pore control the movement of substances between the nucleus and the cytoplasm. Okay, and so for this, small molecules move by diffusion. They move into and out of the nucleus via diffusion, but then your large molecules like ribonucleic acid, they move via active transport. Okay, and so they move via active transport. That is for your nuclear pore. Okay, and so this one is an illustration of your nucleus. This one, the nucleus, you have your nuclear membrane, you have the pores present, and then you have your nucleolus here. This one for your nuclear membrane or the nuclear envelope. Okay, your nucleolus, this one is a cluster of protein, DNA, and RNA. Okay, and so this is a cluster of protein, deoxyribonucleic acid, and ribonucleic acid. Okay, and so with this, your nucleolus can be one or more spherical bodies. And this, it is a small, discrete, round, basophilic body that is rich in RNA accordingly. And what is the function of this one? Stated earlier, it will synthesize, it will produce your ribosomes. And please note again that your ribosomes, they it is it is made of two subunits. Okay, it is made of two subunits. You have your large ribosomal subunit and the other one, the smaller one. Okay, again, this one is the sites of synthesis of ribosomal RNA and the assembly of rRNA and proteins into ribosomal subunits. And please note that this appears during cell division and reorganizes once your new cells are formed accordingly. Okay, and so it disappears during cell division. With that, it regulates the rate of cell division. And yes, for this one, your nucleus, it is prominent in cells that synthesize large amounts of proteins like your muscle cells, and liver cells. Okay, your nuclear envelope. It is a double membrane between the nucleus and the cytoplasm. No, for the outer membrane, that is the passageway of information accordingly. The outer envelope, that is the secretory and transport processes. And the inner membrane, it maintains a stable relationship with your genetic. Yes, your nucleus, it contains your chromatin, that is a complex of deoxyribonucleic acid, the proteins, and some RNA. You have also the chromosomes. Please note that your chromosomes, these are a pair of chromatids. A pair of chromatids will make up your chromosome. And your chromosome, they are long molecule of DNA that is coiled together with several proteins. Okay, and with this, they are rod-shaped bodies which contain the genes or hereditary factors. Please note that these ones are located in the nucleus, your genes or your hereditary units. And again, you have thousands of genes present in each cell. And again, you have each gene carries a specific hereditary trait that is either physical, biochemical, and physiologic. Okay, and so with this, in your nucleus is regarded as your control center of the cell. That is called so because you have here in your nucleus, you have here the presence. That is where you can find your genes. That is where you can find your DNA. That is where you can find your genes. And again, your genes, they determine the traits we inherit. They control protein synthesis. What do you call this? By controlling, sorry, the protein synthesis, accordingly they regulate most of the activities that takes place in body cells throughout our lives. Okay, and so then what makes your cell nucleus the control center of the cell? That is because of the presence of your genes. Okay, that is for your nucleus. And yes, during cell division, the hereditary information is passed on to the next generation of your cells. The genes are passed on to the next generation of the cells. Okay, and with that, we're talking about genes. Then let's take a look at your traits. You have your dominant and your recessive. When you say dominant trait, these are inherited characters determined by a dominant gene. Okay, and one copy of the gene accordingly is sufficient to yield an outward display of the trait. It masks the presence of a recessive trait accordingly. And this one can be inherited from a single parent. Comparing it with an example of your dominant trait, you have your brown colors because these are what you call this seen in the majority of the population, the dominant trait. Okay, you have brown eyes, dark hair, and the rest. And then for your recessive, outwardly obvious only when two copies of the gene from the trait are present. Then with this, you inherited two copies of your recessive gene and seen only in the absence of a dominant gene. Examples you have here, a gray eye color, light red hair color, and the rest. genotype. Your phenotype, phenotype and genotype. Your phenotype, they are the observable physical or biochemical characteristic of an organism. And yes, they are determined by both genetic makeup and environmental influences. Okay, and so with that, your skin color, your eyes, the color of your eyes, and the rest, that is your phenotype. And your genotype, that is the genetic makeup of an organism or a group of organism for your genotype. Okay, and so that is your what do you call this? That is probably your DNA for your genotype. Okay, so let's move on to your cellular components. Your cellular components. Okay. Yes, you have here your components of your cytoplasm, you have your nucleic acids, and the rest. Okay? And so please note that your nucleic acids, they are organic molecules that contain carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. Okay, you have actually, yes, you have your phosphoric acid present in your nucleic acids. Okay? And so you have your two types. You have the first one, you have your deoxyribonucleic acid. This one forms the inherited genetic material inside each human cell. And your ribonucleic acid relays instructions from the genes to guide each cell's synthesis of proteins from amino acids. No? Okay, going back to your DNA or your deoxyribonucleic acid, you have here the presence of genes. Okay, and so your genes determine the traits that we inherit. And okay, and so where can you find your nucleic acid? They are present in the nucleus. They are present in the nucleus. And with that, what they call this, by controlling your protein synthesis, they regulate most of your activities that take place in the body's cells throughout your lives. Okay, and so that is why your cell nucleus, the nucleus is regarded as your control center of the cell. Okay, and so due again to the presence of these substances. Okay, and yes, hereditary substance, hereditary material, when your cell divides, its hereditary information passes on to the next generation of the cells. Okay, that is for your nucleic acids. Component of the cells, component of your cells. And then you have your water. Water, accordingly, is the most abundant component. Is the most abundant component. And yes, that is your fluid medium in which all your chemical reactions take place. Okay, and so your cytosol, that is 90% water. And please note that nearly all the body's chemical reactions occur in a watery medium. Okay, and so that is your reaction medium. And yes, your water gives a turgor or firmness to your cell. And then your proteins, you have they are large molecules that contain carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. And yes, please note that some of your proteins also contain sulfur. Okay, your protein has minerals. They have minerals in the body, your proteins. Okay, and so one of which, again, we talk about your membrane proteins, and yes, they are proteins. You have the functions. Okay, and so largely your proteins are largely responsible for the structure of the body tissues. And then aside from that, again, okay, and so they can function as enzymes, they can function to catalyze reactions, they can function as receptors, they can function as for defense as such. Okay, and so please note that in normal lean adult body is 12 to 18% protein. And yes, this one, your proteins responsible for structure of the body. This one provides materials for building and repair of tissues. And yes, in terms of energy, accordingly, your proteins, 1 gram of protein can give 4 calories. And your lipids contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. But then, unlike unlike in your carbohydrates, is that it does not contain a 2:1 ratio of hydrogen to oxygen. Okay, and so your lipids, they are insoluble in polar solvents. And examples of your lipids include fatty acids, triglycerides, phospholipids, steroids, eicosanoids, and some vitamins. Okay, and what is the function of this? It can function as a secondary source of energy, and it will provide elasticity to your tissues, and it will somewhat insulate your body. Okay, and so provide an insulation for heat. And then your carbohydrates, they represent accordingly only 2 to 3% of your total body mass. Okay, and so, but then this is your main source of energy, or your primary source of energy. Examples of your carbohydrates, you have your sugars, glycogen, starch, and cellulose. And this one, again, main source of your chemical energy for generating ATP needed to drive metabolic reactions. And accordingly, few carbohydrates are used as building blocks. Example, you have your ribose that is present in your ribonucleic acid, and the deoxyribose present in your deoxyribonucleic acid. Okay, and then electrolytes, finally, you have here your charged ions. Okay, and so your charged ions. And yes, your sodium, that is your major extracellular cation, your chloride, that is your major extracellular anion, your potassium, that is your major intracellular cation, and your phosphate, that is your major intracellular anion. Okay, and so that is for your cellular components.